the last plenary session, and then we're going to have our panel discussion after this. So, as I said, I'm coming into this session. There was another session planned, and I'm very happy to be doing this. I just delivered this presentation in the last 24 hours at a global internal communications conference called Popular Bootcamp, hence why there's that brand at the bottom. So Alex did take you through my background in terms of what I do. I'm an alignment, communication and brand strategist, one of the leading, I think I'm the only leading alignment strategist in Australia, and specialising in guiding alignment and of an organisation's purpose, people and brand with strategy, business performance and market for peak performance. So I won't take you through the various roles I have, but I work with boards and leaders in private, public and not-for-profit sectors. So in terms of what we're covering today, we're having a look at how alignment is one way that you can actually unlock the value of your people. We're covering off a number of different areas, the impact that alignment has in an organisation, a proven methodology and some practical tips on how to build alignment. And then specifically with regards to that methodology, there are 4 steps and 5 key principles that communication can take on board if you want to succeed in building and maintaining alignment. So just imagine if organisations were able to fulfil their promises or fulfill their purpose and deliver on their promises. What kind of world would we have? We'd be in a much better place. We would have prosperity, purpose delivered, people and planet all well aligned. So the 4 Ps. There's a breathtaking scene in part 2 of the Queen documentary Days of Our Lives. It shows thousands of concert goers all just clapping while Queen performs one of their greatest hits, Radio Gaga. It then cuts to the record producer, whose name's Dave Richards, who recalls a fascinating moment with Queen's iconic lead singer, Freddie Mercury. He said, Freddie said, "What we do is like the Olympics. It's people believing in you and people and everyone behind you and everyone doing the same thing together. That's the Olympics," he said. That's what we do. And that, in organisational context, is what strategic alignment is about. It's about getting all the elements in what I would call your enterprise value chain working together harmoniously. So in terms of alignment, the what and the why, it's about ensuring that your people are all on the same page. So we're working together, we're doing the right things, we're moving in the right direction. And we have that shared meaning. Every organisation has a story, who you are, where you're going and how you'll get there. And the real goal of alignment is to embed this story so that it effectively becomes the organisation's DNA. And we've seen a lot of our speakers today talk about purpose and mission and vision and all of that, and how it is that guiding North Star for a lot of the work that they do. So what is it and why is it important? As I said, it's about unity, it's about clarity, and most importantly, it's about shared meaning. It's a valuable way to drive performance, to minimise risk, and to differentiate. So why is it important? So there's a whole series of research that you can find that shows that alignment is critical to customer experience, strategy, execution, transformation, agility, collaboration, mergers and acquisitions. In terms of, say, strategy execution, the Economic Intelligence Unit found that there's 63%, on average, 63% of misunderstanding or a lack of understanding by the middle tier. So that frozen middle, the middle management in terms of executing strategy. And if any of you have a look at your employee surveys, for example, and you have a look at the understanding of strategy, you will find that the ELT, the SLT, their scores are quite high, whereas the number will drop significantly as you move down the layers in your organisation. In terms of transformation and change, McKinsey has found that successful digital transformation is 3 times stronger if you have a clear change story. With regards to agility, again, McKinsey's saying that if the North Star is embodied across the enterprise, you're more likely to be able to be much more agile in your response. BCG talk about a strong alignment to purpose, strategy and priorities for teams to actually improve resilience and be much more effective and efficient. When it comes to trust, for example, Edelman talks about, values, vision, mission, and purpose being the top comms topics that are most effective in building that employer-employee trust relationship. And in terms of collaboration, again, going back to McKinsey, alignment on parent and partnership objectives is the #1 driver of success. And for internal communications and trust, it's second. So it is quite critical. So it is important. So I did a study back in 2018 with a colleague through IBC a number of years ago, as I said, and it was the first global study that focused on strategic alignment and the role of communications. We had almost 230 respondents from across the globe. About 40% were in APAC. So it is relevant to here. Most 80% were at director or VP level or above in terms of who responded. Organisations range from about 50 employees through to over 1 million employees, and you can guess who that organisation would be as a corporate. They had 97% of the respondents actually said that they understood that strategic alignment was important to an organisation achieving its organisational goals. So that's fantastic. So we know that. 57% thought that their organisations were aligned. But in reality, of those that actually completed the survey and when we went through the detail, only 13% were actually strongly aligned, 13%. So the commonalities amongst those that were high performers were that they agreed that there was that strategic narrative is key to employee communication. They agreed that the corporate brand platform is key to internal and external comms and marketing. They strongly agreed that alignment is an important priority for their CEO, their ELT, and their SLT. And they all had strong partnerships with strategy, HR, legal, finance, IT, marketing, and so on. And they were also able to influence and support leaders to ensure that they were strong advocates for strategic alignment. And the one figure that I think most of you would agree with is 9 out of 10 of them reported directly to the CEO. So that was really important. So in terms of what is the problem? 40%, actually only 40% of them only believe that purpose, vision, values, and strategy were a key part of their employee communications, external communications and marketing. So if only 13% were strongly aligned, when you look at the rest of them and you think about why is it that they weren't aligned, this is part of the answer for you. So it is quite concerning. The other key parts from an employee comms perspective, internal comms perspective, was strategic narrative was only used actively by 28%, strategy was only used by 39%, values were used by 45%, and vision was 36%, and the corporate brand platform, only 24%. So alignment is a blind spot for many in organisations, and it's not because leaders or communication professionals don't believe it's important, but it's because they don't understand how to do it or they're not committed to it. When we asked what were the barriers, most of the respondents said one of a few things. They said it was either a lack of awareness, a lack of cohesion, silos, empires, or politics. And all those pieces of all those responses basically relate back to misalignment. So if you've got a lack of cohesion, or if you've got a siloed environment, or you see that you're not able to achieve goals, or people aren't understanding what they're supposed to be doing, or they're going off doing their own thing, that is a clear sign of misalignment. So from a communication perspective, it is time to step up. So we know that 2020 actually did shine a light on communications and internal communications in particular. So I was really pleased to hear the quote from the two Nicks yesterday, you know, that I see is the new black and I see as the bridesmaid becoming the bride. And that is very, very true. And there are so many opportunities that we have here to actually build on what we've learned and what we have achieved. So we need to do that, or the halo above our heads will actually fade. So it is an effort that we need to look at and leverage and see how we can actually build upon it. Don't let this opportunity pass us by. So there was a study from 2019 from McKinsey that reflected that employees feel that purpose is important, but many say their companies don't have one, let alone one that makes a difference. So from those, 82% of the respondents said that it is important to have a purpose. 72% thought that it should have more weight than profit. And 62% thought that their organisations had a purpose statement, yet only 42% of those organisations, their purpose statements had any impact. So it's the articulation of that purpose, those purpose statements, and we're encompassing, when we're talking about a purpose statement, it is that whole piece together, you know, the vision, the mission, the purpose, the key goals, where we're going, where we're heading. That needs to make sense. And it also not only makes sense, but it needs to be understood and it needs to have meaning. So as a profession, and particularly within internal comms, we've got this incredible opportunity to do something with that. So the research that we did in 2018 also showed that 35% of senior comms leaders felt that their organisation was aligned to corporate purpose, and only 40% of them used it as key part of employee comms. So we have this opportunity to step that up. We know that there is a lot of interest, in particular in purpose, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. So alignment itself can break down along that value chain within an organisation, but ultimately it's the alignment to the corporate purpose that has the most impact. So I recently completed some work, or a whole piece of study through Oxford University on strategic alignment, and we look at strategic alignment not just from a comms perspective, but overarching across the whole organisation. And there are 5 key elements that you would have in a value chain, for example. So the first one is that organisational purpose, then which is that North Star. Why does an organisation exist beyond making money? And there's always something bigger than what you actually are in that. And we all know how purpose attracts the right people and helps people stay. And it's your North Star in terms of guiding your strategy. The second element is the strategy. The third element is your organisational capability. So what do you really need to win at? And do you have the right sort of people in place to actually do that? The organisational architecture in terms of how you're set up as a business, as an enterprise, your structures, your processes, all of that sort of thing, how it all fits together, and then those systems that you have. So your HR systems, your IT systems, your comms systems, your workplace systems. They're all quite important. Elise was talking about how, you know, they looked at their workplace design. Well, that's really critical, because you can articulate your purpose, you can have a really good strategy, you've got people in place, but if you've got old legacy systems, I can tell you it's probably not going to work. So there was a significant focus on corporate purpose, with the business roundtable shining the light on its value for driving performance. And I'm just going to read something interesting to you that just came in my mail yesterday. So I'm a company director and I received the magazine, and there is a huge focus on boards really upping the ante on culture and really connecting back to purpose. So they're driving that. So that will be driving through CEOs and through the rest of the organisation. And there was a comment here, there's a piece here that said, the Washington Post found that some of the 181 American CEOs who signed that 2019 Business Roundtable statement had pledged to balance the needs of shareholders and other stakeholders, including employees. They had actually cut back on staff. and they used the profits to boost shareholder wealth. So the problem is that for a lot of those organisations, it was nothing more than a public relations move. They argue that if the CEOs had taken the pledge seriously, they would have needed the approval from their board. And only 48 of the signatories had responded that when asked whether that had been the case, 47 had said the board had not been involved. So it was quite dangerous for them to actually just go ahead and sign something and not actually be authentic about it and make that run through the rest of the organisation. So you've really got to be careful about that. And that's where, you know, when you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer and they talk about the institutions being both ethical and competent, that ethics is 3 times more impactful on trust than competence. And only in the last 12 months has the business institution actually crossed over and is being seen as ethical. And a lot of that comes down to that pandemic, to the pandemic we've just been through. So that power of purpose is greater when it's leveraged for good. It's possibly, in Australia, there was also a market difference to the rest of the world. Our NGOs were also shown as competent and ethical, whereas prior to that, they were ethical, but not necessarily seen as competent, but now they've elevated that as well. Even business and to some degree media have nudged, but they're still not in both here in Australia, that is. So there's recent research that looks at the impact of purpose on the performance of 200 brands. High purpose brands double their market value 4 times faster than low purpose brands. There's a clear correlation between purpose and financial performance through higher productivity, growth, and employee retention. So it makes sense that one of the areas that we can focus on in this coming year and the year after that is really working with our executives on articulating the purpose statement, the narrative, and helping embed that so it is that is part of our organisation's DNA, as I said. So in terms of the road to alignment, as I mentioned earlier, I did some work with my colleague Wayne Aspland, who we did the original study with. Late last year, we were interested to see, look, how has alignment changed? How are organisations performing? Has it impacted communication? We're remote working. We've got all sorts of things happening. What has happened in terms of the last year and its impact on alignment? So we did this study late last year. We had in-depth discussions with 27 different senior communication leaders across the world, which included a couple that have been involved in this corporate comms leaders summit. And it was fascinating. It was really quite interesting. And if you ask me which one, were we better aligned? The answer is depends. Some were, some weren't. So I'll just take you through some of this now. So in terms of the road to alignment, it's about, as I said, it's about shared understanding of context and shared understanding of those key principles, the key corporate principles that we've got, you know, the vision, the values, the mission and purpose. So it's shared understanding and aligning to that corporate purpose, and then in turn to business strategy. And that's where internal communication professionals can now build our impact, and we can also influence quite a lot right now. So in terms of the road to alignment, we said that there's 4 key steps. So we developed this model after we did the work in 2018, and we've refined it since. So it comes from that. You can find more information in this paper, and I'll let you know where you can get that just to download. So the road to alignment has 4 steps, as I said. It's 1 vision, which is about executive support and setting yourself up for success. 1 story, which is building that narrative that unites everybody. one team, which is all about aligning operations and enabling leaders. One voice is really holding the tension on that story. So this model can be applied to a new strategy, it can be applied to a rebrand, it can be applied to transformation, to change. But you need to bear in mind that every single alignment task is really quite different based on the type and the scale of the task, your current context and what you're trying to achieve. It's also subject to your leadership, cultural capabilities and architecture, and the size and the complexity of teams and your operating model. So there's different things to consider. So there are different ways to do it. This is one approach. I do know others, but this is one approach that I'll take you through. So there are 5 key principles that really must be observed if you're going to succeed as a communicator in alignment. So we tested these principles with the 27 leaders that we had the discussions with. We actually started with 7 and we've culled that back to 5. We really want to keep it as simple as possible, and we all love simplicity. You know, that's one of the things about communication professionals, is that our job is to be able to translate the complex into something simpler for people to actually understand. So the first one is know your enemy. The second one is alignment starts at the top. The third one is strategy first, alignment second. Fourth is less communicating, more enabling communicators. And the fifth is don't stop. So I'm going to spend some time now and take you through each one. Now, please feel free to pop your questions in the live Q&A. Emily will get those to me, and I'm happy to answer as many questions as you like on any aspect of this at the end of the presentation. So I'll just take you through these step by step. So the first one is one vision. So it's about executive support and setting up for success, as I said. And there are 4 key steps there within that. So the first is to measure alignment. There's measuring alignment, business case, aligning your executive and your core team. So measuring alignment is really looking at what is your current state. You really need to appreciate what your current state is before you can move anywhere. So that's a pretty basic sort of principle. Where are we at now before we know where we're going to go to? And as part of that, it's the first principle comes into play. The first principle is know your enemy. So you need to understand where those alignment gaps are. So I mentioned this earlier in another chat. One of the simplest, easiest ways to do it is to have a look at that employee survey. And the employee survey, as I said, you know, if you look at people's understanding of strategy, their understanding of what the purpose is, vision, all those sorts of things, you can have a look at those numbers, that data, and pull that insight from there. So if you can see there are discrepancies between different parts of the organisation, different types of employees, leaders, middle managers, senior managers, you can see there's a level of misalignment there already. So you will always generally find ELT, SLTB will be higher than that middle manager level, which a lot of people call the frozen middle, and you need to make sure that you can bring them along that journey and they really get it. And then, you know, your employees. There are alignment diagnostics you can do. There's a tool that I use that I'm licensed in. It's called Mirror Mirror. It's an alignment tool that looks at alignment in teams. So it's a survey diagnostic, very simple, 20-minute survey. You give it to a key team. It could be a ELT, which is a really good place to start, by the way, SLT, or it could be your comms team, for example. And you fill out these questions, and it comes back with a report which shows you the gaps in terms of what people are thinking, what they understand, in terms of aligning to the purpose, to the values, to your goals, to your vision, and to each other. It shows you how comfortable they are with psychological safety, with communication. You can ask them about leadership, a whole range of things. So you get the average and you get the gap. They don't know who's who, but what it gives you that snapshot. It's like looking into a mirror. It basically lifts that fog away from where from where you're currently at, and it gives you an overview. And you go through a facilitated discussion to actually talk through why those gaps are there, what's important to you, and what do you really need to focus on. So that helps to start with. You can also do a whole series of stakeholder interviews, and that will give you interesting insight in what people are thinking. I remember a number of years ago, I was doing a major brand strategy piece for an organisation. I did a whole series of interviews. And when it came to their strategy, for example, everyone remembered the tagline for the strategy, and they used a balanced scorecard approach, everything on a page. But the majority of the employees and the managers didn't actually understand what that strategy was really about. They didn't really understand what their role is and why it was important. And when I asked all of them, what are the top 3 things you need to understand about the organisation? They wanted to know what the vision really was, how they were going to get there, and what their role is. And they didn't have that. And that organisation had cut out internal communications. They had a comms team, but no one in charge of IC. And they cut them out because they said every communication, every manager is a communicator. They should just be able to do that. Yet they didn't actually enable them to do that. They didn't empower them in any way. The important part about building a business case for alignment is that you have to really sell it into your executive. Your executive needs to understand why alignment is really important. And there is a whole way of showing that. There's a whole variety of papers. You could go to the various research pieces that I've put together as well, that you can have for free. It's no big deal. And you can have a look at that and put a case forward to the executive for that. Because ultimately, if your executive is not supporting the alignment initiative across the organisation, it's not going to work. And that's been proven. So you really need that commitment. The other aspect of it is that, so you need to build that case, align them, and then you need to ensure that you've got the right team. You need to build that team. So it's the alignment with HR, with marketing, with strategy, planning, finance. You need to put them in that team. The next step is that one story, building that narrative that unites everyone. And that's one thing that we're really, really, really good at. So ultimately, it's trying to create something that is simple, it's credible and inspiring so that people get the story, they collectively understand it, they buy the story, so they buy into it, it makes sense to them, and they share the story. So they can and they want to talk about it, and it's ultimately living that story. So that underpins their actions and decision making. So we've seen a number of examples today of how that has already worked, which has been great in the case studies that have been shared with us. We need to assess how the organisation talks about itself. So have a think about, so you're auditing what that existing story is. I'm working with a ELT and a board at the moment on reworking their vision, purpose, and how the strategy all fits together. And it's looking at what is there already, what is good, what can we keep, what do we need to change, what do we need to reframe before they go about putting that comm strategy together and trying to actually implement it through the organisation. We need to make sure that we can build that right context externally. So where are we actually at externally? What does the external audience actually think of us? Are our expectations of what's external in terms of the perceptions of our brand fitting with what we think it actually is? So we need to assess that. We create a simple one-pager. So it's fantastic to be able to create something that's visual that you can reference. So some sort of artifacts that you can actually look at, which is really handy to do. We also have that narrative that you need to create. And that narrative is that overarching story. So it's not just something that is words on a page. It's something that people need to be able to share and talk about. You need to be able to help people share those different elements, so values, getting leaders to, and people leaders in particular, to understand how they can share the story and make it personal to them, so the individual purpose connects with the overarching purpose of the organisation, so they know how to share the story, so it becomes real and it's not in corporate speak. So it's not just about understanding, but it's about shared understanding of context and what you're doing. So creating that new strategy, whether it's new strategy, new purpose, purpose articulation, not a new purpose specifically, transformation and process. One thing that I was going to talk about is that purpose stays the same. Your articulation of the purpose can differ. Your vision will change. Your mission will change. So the vision is, something that, if you were looking at Simon's concentric circles, your why is your purpose, then you would have your what and your how. So your what is the vision, what do we want to achieve in 5-10 years time, and the how is that mission, how we're actually going to get there. So that's one way of visualizing it. The next step is one team. It's aligning people, the role, clarity and training, launch, contextualization, and I can't even say this. Operationalize. I just got it out barely. Anyway, so the key principle that I want to talk about here is less communicating, more enabling. So over time, we need to make sure that we're really working with our people leaders, our line managers, to help them communicate better, to help them understand what they need to achieve, the why, the what, the how, and help their team understand it as well. So there is that shared meaning and they can actively talk about it. So, we need to communicate that story everywhere. It's in digital, in posters, support material, etc. We need to ensure that we're modelling behaviour, the processes, the storytelling, the reward and recognition and performance management. It's all in that. Microsoft is a perfect example of how they've actually done that really, really well. And the last one is one voice, which is hold tension on the story. So it's that comms 101, making sure all your comms, both internal and external, supports and builds on the story. It's about consistency, clarity and constancy. You're in it for the long road. You need to communicate, connect, train, measure, evaluate, learn, adapt and iterate. So that principle is don't stop. So we're not really let off the hook very easily. If you want to find out more, you can go to my website. There's a resources section. You can just download stuff from there. Please be aware that I don't spam, so that's absolutely fine. You're very welcome to get those resources from anywhere. So I have a question here. It says, I found that sometimes the corporate speak is developed, the corporate strategy is developed in corporate speak and is seen as a completed document for comms to just amplify. At what stage should communications be involved in developing the strategy to make sure it's in plain language before the horse is bolted? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other. My comment on that is that if you can be involved as early as possible in the strategy development, that would be fantastic, but that just depends on the level you're at in the organisation. Alternatively, it is about talking to the leaders and making sure that saying, this is your area of expertise. Your role is to simplify and help people understand it. So it's give you that opportunity to help them craft what that narrative is going to be, what those artifacts are going to be, how you're going to share it with people, create that campaign for embedding it through the organisation, make it live and breathe, teach them how to do the storytelling, the business storytelling. It's really important. I did I reviewed some work recently by an organisation that implemented a new strategy, and they had a 6-week program where they did that implementation of strategy. and made sure that it was really well understood. And they started with, communicating with ELT, senior team, middle managers and people, and they had discussions. So they had discussions all around elements of the strategy and what they were trying to achieve. So they shared it. They made sure people understood. They created a virtual room in Teams. They had the Yammer jams or Yam jams going, a whole series of different things to make sure people actually understood and they didn't use complicated language. It's important to make it really quite simple as possible. So are there any other questions or any other aspects that people might want to know about? Please feel free to contact me directly. As I said, I'm happy to share. We've got a whole series of resources on that website that are available to you on elements on alignment, on communication. So please feel free to have a look at that. There's information there that can help you build your business case as well, if you need to do that work, or even if you just wanted to have a chat about it, something that you're working on confidentially. I'm happy to have a half-hour chat. That's all absolutely okay. So just feel free to contact me. Okay. I feel like I've been talking a lot today. So we're almost at that time for the next session. So if there's no more questions, which I don't think there are, Emily, I'm just going to we have 3 minutes left, no more questions. Okay. So what I might do is I'm going to let the rest of you have a quick 2-minute, I'm going to say bio break, which is what they say in the US whenever we're at a conference. And we're starting at 3:40 precisely, and we're going to have our panel discussion. So please be back in time for that. So thank you very much.